It happens on a subatomic level. It all comes down to forces. So there's a positive ionic charge and there's negative ionic charge. In this case, people have to get around the idea that a positive ionic charge is not a good thing and a negative ionic charge is a good thing. Negative ionic charge means there's more electrons in the outer belt of the atom than there are protons in the nucleus. This makes for a life-generating force. This is lots of electrons. Electrons are life-generating. Electrons are life force, if you can look at it that way. So healthy human tissue is charged with electrons. It's negatively ionically charged. When substances that are acidic, so that's alkaline, right? Healthy tissue is alkaline. When substances that are acidic come into that healthy alkaline, negatively ionically charged tissue, it sticks magnetically because the positive charge sticks to the negative charge. So what happens is, if you can imagine, the food comes in, the acidic food comes in, and it's like it hits the skids. You know, it's like coming in and it hits the alkaline tissue, and this is negatively ionically charged. It's like going, and it starts to magnetize to it, starts to stick, and in sticking it slows down. So it hits the skids, and then it basically embeds. So when the healthy tissue and the positive ionic charge acidic substance meets, it sticks through magnetization or magnetism, and in that stickiness, as it sits, it becomes more and more dehydrated, and it also dehydrates the tissue because it starts to rob the tissue of its own innate inherent water content, and then they basically wind up forging together. They become married, unfortunately. And so in that unhealthy union, that matter just starts to, it embeds deeper and deeper and deeper with every day, because with every passing day there's going to be less water content, and all that's left is this union, is this magnetization. So the tissue gets dry, the matter is only going to get drier. The substance that goes in, what's amazing to think about is that anything you take into the body by mouth is going to be its moistest when you take it in. It's going to get drier and drier and drier after that point, which means it's less kinetic with every passing moment, which means the chances of it actually leaving the body, being eliminated, needs to have, the intestine needs water content, and the matter needs to have water content in order to leave. Otherwise it gets stuck. So we talk about being stuck. So the chances of it leaving are the best that day, and then they decrease and decrease and decrease thereon. What people need to understand, what happens is that if this matter is not leaving the body, then and it's continuing to enter. So it's the 3 meals a day plus snacks plus drinks plus a bag of chips plus whatever it is, like all this stuff coming in all day long, and it's not actually all leaving, then you have what's called accumulation. So if you can, imagine that some of it leaves. So people think, oh yeah, I went to the bathroom. Yeah, but did you really release everything? No ways. If you're happy, if a person is happy to keep most of what they're consuming in their body, then they can keep doing that. But if the idea of keeping most of what you're consuming is not that appealing to you, then you want to do the awaken and release method of cleansing, which is what I teach, to get this waste that's been magnetized into the tissue up and out of the tissue and released from the body, which is perfectly doable once people know how to do it. It's actually really successful, can even be fun. Yes, and not only is it sitting in there, it's not, even though it's not kinetic, it's not dormant. It's percolating pathogens. So it's the perfect breeding ground. What's happening is, remember I was talking about the healthy alkaline tissue. What it does is it changes the biological terrain of the tissue. So if you imagine the tissue has this terrain, and its bioterrain is alkaline. If it now is married to acidic substances, it's no longer going to be so alkaline, which means it's going to be a breeding ground for all forms of pathogens, because that's what percolates, that's what grows in acidic matter, and this becomes acidic tissue then. So the whole system then starts basically being the landscape for bugs to grow. Parasites, rogue bacteria, rogue microbes of all sorts, fungus, yeast being a single-celled fungus. It's just, and then it's no surprise that we have all manner of symptoms in all manner of places. So it just becomes this, okay, well, if there are pathogens percolating everywhere, and by the way, these colonies of pathogens these pathogens are having babies, and they're growing, they're proliferating throughout. And these babies and these colonies of pathogens are consuming what you're eating, so they're defecating, they're passing noxious gas. So you're basically becoming the septic environment for their consumption of what you're eating, and in that, they're making all this noxious stuff. I mean, it becomes exponentially, it compounds. The problem compounds and compounds and compounds. And all we have to do, such a simple solution, is expunge it. I mean, if you want to look at the timeline of colon cleansing, it's not only extensive, it's also very humorous, but it legitimizes, you know, what needs to be done to clean the body. You know, people clean their cars fastidiously, they brush their teeth fastidiously, they clean their houses, and you know all these other things. But their body's filthy. But on that note, thousands of years ago, the consumption isn't what it is now. So what they were even applying colon irrigation to what people were eating 2,000 years ago, which is what they did. They did their colon irrigation 2,000 years ago. It's documented throughout, but they were eating, you know, dates and grain, and it was all fresh from the field. It may not have been, you know, ideal. They may have been overeating what they were overeating and things, and maybe there was, you know, the meat and the alcohol and some of these other things too. But it was at least it was far less adulterated. So they were even cleansing in that unadulterated environment. Now we are super adulterated. We are, you know, this is heinous substances they're going into the body, and then people are not correspondingly irrigating their colons. It's a recipe for disaster, and but it goes to show, because people's skeletal muscular structures are weak. The teeth are falling out. Everybody has, you know, like what's really going on in the modern human body. It's, you know, everybody has specialists for everything. There used to be a GP, and they could pretty much cover everything. Now you've got to have your endocrinologist and your, you know, and not even within dentistry alone, there is a whole spectrum of specialists. Within every category alone, there's a spectrum, because medical science, modern medical science, takes everything apart. It compartmentalizes every symptom, and it doesn't understand that's part of an interconnected whole. So if it addresses everything separately, then naturally you would need a specialist for that separate, that conception of a separate problem, when really, if one understands that the body is exhibiting a symptom because the whole system is in trouble, then they would address the whole system, and then that specific location of the symptom, or everything this thing is expressing, would automatically be solved. Yeah. It's much easier to solve things from a holistic perspective. I mean, we're made to think, and if you ask any mainstream doctor, they'll say you don't need colon irrigation. They'll say that everything does get released, that the body knows how to get rid of things. The body is so congested. In the most perfect of circumstances, where you would have a system that all of its eliminative organs were flowing smoothly, perhaps if you had all the systems flowing smoothly and the substances going in were full of life force. Yeah. So what you would have under that those conditions is alkaline food entering alkaline tissue. So they would it would deliver what was necessary, but it wouldn't stick, and everything would flow through. Assimilation would happen, elimination would happen, probably relatively thoroughly. But that's in a body that's not defunct, that hasn't had this unfortunate degeneration over the lineage across, you know, our ancestors basically would have been pure, which is not the case, and we would have been born perfect, and we would be eating perfect food from perfect soil, from perfect alkaline water, air, and energy. So that's not what we're dealing with. And if anyone is thinking along those lines, they're really only fooling themselves and cheating themselves, because under the conditions that we're coming into life with this kind of compromised system, and then we're taking highly compromised substances, it's a double whammy. And in this case, two negatives don't make a positive. No, in fact, it's good for it to be a little bit cool. The cooler the water, the more the gas pressure will leave. Okay, so there's a lot of different ways to go about colon irrigation. there's right way and a wrong way. A pressurized system that's, as you say, pushing water into the body is not ideal. Okay. What the ideal method is gravity fed, so that the water is just the tank. If you're going to a professional, the tank is up about 3 feet above you. You're lying down, and it's just natural gravity that's bringing the water down and into your system. Okay. My system, the Enlightener, is also it uses gravity to offset the pressure, so that the water pressure is coming from the sink, but you're standing, so you're offsetting the pressure. So you're actually using gravity, but in a different way. So there's no, so the idea is that the water gently enters. Yeah. It saturates the tissue. It saturates the waste matter, and in saturating it, it makes the waste kinetic again. Because the waste, if it's dry, it's not leaving the system. If it's dry, there's no peristalsis. Peristalsis is that natural muscular contraction that you have in the large intestine when there's matter to leave. But if the matter is dry and it's deep in the walls, which it is, and in the center, and everything's dry, there's no movement. It's like a desert. And people often think, well, I drink a lot of water. I'm going to drink 8 glasses of water and I'm going to be fine and I'm going to be hydrated. But that's ludicrous, because the water that you're drinking isn't getting to your intestine. It's and your body's also having its water content consistently leached by the dried substances that have made a home in it. So if you want to get this waste kinetic, if you want to get the peristalsis going in your large intestine, the water needs to go into your large intestine and actually be delivered where it's needed. Exactly. It's sitting there dry. And the problem is that if as the waste sits there, it gets drier, so the likelihood of it ever leaving decreases every day. Well, this is why people have huge intestinal problems. I mean, it used to be that people would talk just about IBS, but now IBS is sort of this umbrella condition under which we have Crohn's, diverticulitis, diverticulosis. There are countless bowel diseases, and more importantly, the removal of parts of the bowel is on the rise. Yeah. So I can't tell you the number of people who come to me asking if they can even use an Enlightener or go for colon hydrotherapy because they've had part of their intestine removed, and that's the consequence. So when people say to me, oh, it seems so unnatural to do colon irrigation, I'm thinking, but yet they'll go and have part of their colon removed, or they'll have part of their pancreas removed, or they'll have their thyroid removed. But God forbid, we put water, where the sun don't shine. That's, it's so simple, and it would prevent all of those things from being necessary. And so people really need to get their heads around what is cleanliness, and what does it mean to be hygienic. And once we care for our own internal hygiene, the way the way most people, not everybody, the way most people care for their space, their living spaces, and the things that they care about taking care of. For example, I'll always like to ask people what does a great musician always do with their instrument, no matter what? Number one, they're going to keep it clean, and number two, they're going to make sure it's well tuned. And if it's not clean, there's no way it's going to be well tuned. But those two things are the fundamental things that anyone who is a real musician is going to do, whether they're an amateur and they just love to play their instrument, or they're playing on at Carnegie Hall. So we are if you think about traditional Chinese medicine, they understood that the body was just strings, meridians and nadis. Also with Ayurveda. And this understanding that these strings, these threads of life, are what actually make us up. And behind the world of form, behind what we find tangible, is this energetic blueprint that we are, which is also threads. It's a network. And so if there's junk on these strings, if you had a harp and you have, I give this analogy all the time, if there's something on the harp strings, if there's crud on the harp strings, okay, you're going to try and pluck that string, and it's not going to make a sound. No. So if we're a string instrument, and there's all this crud on our proverbial heartstrings too, yes, but on our harp strings, then we're going to be feel, what's the word? I suppose not numbed, but we're not going to have zing. We're not going to be able to play.
Yeah.
Our instrument is not going to play. So what most people have is a lot of crud on their harp strings, and they're walking around feeling really drab. They're dragging their feet through life. And then they think, well, why don't I have energy? What can I put into my body to give me energy? It's the wrong approach. The energy I'm lacking is due to the fact that my body's filled with obstruction. Let me remove the obstruction, and I'll have tons of energy. And I don't need to take anything in from the outside, but I need to remove what's compromising my instrument from within. So what people typically do is they'll reach for stimulants. So what's important to understand is that anything that's stimulant, the important thing to understand is that anything that is stimulative, is a stimulant, is also acidic, which means it's also addictive. The degree to which something is acidic is the degree to which it's going to be addictive, and all addictive stimulants are acidic. So if you can think addictive, stimulant, acidic, it's like the trio. And so when people are always reaching, and I call those things false fire. They're not real energy. They're masquerading as energy. They give you a kick. They give you the stimulation. But what we want to have is a natural, inherent, high vibration kind of energy. And that comes. What's so amazing about that is that when we release the obstruction, then not only is our blueprint of our strings, our structure, our instrument, and all of the threads and strings within it, not only is that now pulsating with life force and zinging, humming, has that visceral frequency, that vibration. The fact that we don't experience this is so sad. I mean, I experienced it, but the fact that everyone doesn't get to experience it is really sad, because it makes you inexplicably happy, inexplicably generous, inexplicably loving. It's just, you just are zinging through the world, and it's, you're easy to be around, you have so much to give. But what's so magical is that when that happens, you're connected with the whole network of life. It's not just like you're in an isolation chamber and you're feeling better. That would be impossible, because where's the energy coming from? The energy isn't originating here. There's a heart of the universe, and that's zinging. And when you're open and able to receive it, it enters you, and then you have a central point of your own, the own center of your own universe, your core. Yeah. The word court, order in the court. The court is the cœur in French, the cœur, the center. So there is this center point from which our energy radiates out and conducts from. But then there's worlds within worlds. So there's this world within the bigger sphere, and it goes and it goes and goes endlessly. But the beauty of it is, the second we reach that kind of that requisite level of removal of obstruction, the second where our instrument is attuned enough, clean enough, it will be able to take in a flood of energy from the great all in all that we move and live and have our breathing within. You're on the right track, and you know that you're getting cleaner when you start to feel energy that reminds you of what you felt like when you were a kid. And you start to think, oh my gosh, I remember this. It's such an incredible feeling, because you're like, oh, I felt this when I was like 6 years old, 8 years old, 4 years old, however far back you need to go. And like, this is such a familiar memory. How did I lose touch with this? And kids who are living free, open lives and haven't, had their lives compromised anyway, they know this feeling. This is why children are so bouncy and so quick to be joyous and to laugh. Children laugh several hundred times a day. We laugh, like, if we're lucky, a few times a day. So that comes from just being so super connected. Of course, our being so stressed and having so many concerns, and the fear, the worry. These are things that the adult world we walk around with, and we have to let go of those too, because those create huge amounts of obstruction in our being as well. So we have to identify where we are being governed by fear and stress and lack of peace. We're entitled as human beings. We're entitled to peace, and yet we're inundated, we're bombarded constantly with that which would, get in the way of our peace. And most people sign up for it because they're so afraid of silence and calmness that because it forces them to sort of feel themselves, and it doesn't feel nice to feel themselves because they're so saturated with all this this obstruction at that point, that it feels better to be super stimulated. So thus the whole cycle of addiction continues and increases. But what's important to understand about peace, true peace, is not boring. True peace is the connection with the life force, the connection with the universal energy, which is the strongest pulse. It's the pulse of life, and that's flooding through you. So true peace means you're inspired. You are feeling joyous. It's not that you're like, it's not a stillness. It's kind of like the difference between sanitizing something and sterilizing something. So what people think is peace is actually sterility. Real peace is sanitization, which is sanity, which is being sane, which is a really cool place to be. The opposite of sanity, of course, is not a place we want to be. So, but sanity, meaning clean, to be sane, to be clean, it puts things in a different perspective. But then, which forces us to look at sterility. And sterility is, you go to the hospital, you use those hand sanitizers. They're not sanitizers, they're sterilizers, and they're killing everything. They're like an antibiotic, which is anti-life. So sterility, and again, as we know, because you can't generate life, you can't progenerate if you're sterile. But our culture tends to want to obliterate all life in order to prove cleanliness, but that's not cleanliness. Cleanliness actually is an expression of life in its highest order, which is not sterile. It's full of microbes, but it's life-generating microbes, which, so healthy soil, fertile soil, as opposed to sterile soil, is not what people might think of as clean. That's why you have, the last couple generations, mothers freaking out about kids playing in the dirt, but that's actually super clean.
And good for them to actually be exposed.
Yes, and yet all of these things that they would have them exposed to, the vaccines, the packaged foods, it's a celebration, so let's just take in all this sugar, which is just a breeding ground for pathogens, which is truly unclean. So it's a complete a perversion of what is clean and what's not clean, and the first step is for parents to get that right, because of course we only learn what to do from our parents and our culture and our teachers and our peers. So that's a good starting point. Well, the first thing I would say is to bring order to your intake. People think that eating disorders are merely textbook eating disorders, anorexia, bulimia, orthorexia, all these things. In fact, the whole world is in eating disorder because they're eating chaotically, they're eating haphazardly. So the opposite of order is chaos, and the way people eat is chaotic. So if you can just start to bring some order to the way you eat, I'll give you a few tips on that. Think about the things that just don't belong in the diet, period, because they're going to exacerbate your problems. Sugar, white starches, the things that are really, really, that unfavorable. So, and that, when I say unfavorable, I mean highly acidic, things that are going to contribute to the problems in your bioterrain. They're going to make you even more acidic and create, and cause more accumulation blockages. So that would be your mainstream animal fleshes, your white flour, anything packaged, any fast food, obviously, all that stuff. Just take that as those things as a category, and say this is not part of the order in my life. This is no order in the court. Okay, so that gets just put all of that stuff aside, and then look at what's left. Look at the Whole Foods. Look at the not Whole Foods as the store, because that's a kind of a chaos market, but foods in their whole original source form. And then from there, think about how you're going to order your day. Have some plan for how you're going to consume your food. because otherwise it just becomes this mishmash all day long, and usually one food will trigger another, and you'll have something too salty, then you'll want something too sweet to balance it out, and you'll be too dehydrated, so you'll want to drink, but then the drink, is typically not going to be water, and then the whole thing becomes a problem. So create a day of order, a day in the life, a day of order. And it's really helpful if you think about a couple things. One, try and have a vegetable juice every day. Preferably a green vegetable juice without a lot of fruit sugar, preferably no fruit sugar, but if you need to put an apple or a pear in there, or a carrot or a beet just to make it a little bit sweeter, more palatable, by all means, if you need to do that, that's fine. But try and have a green juice every day as the first thing you consume. If it can't be the first thing, fine, just make sure it's in there. Try to have at least one leafy green salad every day. In a perfect world, try and have it with your lunch and your dinner. Whatever else you're going to have, if you're going to have a roast turkey, have a salad and roast turkey. If you're going to have a steak, have a salad and steak. If you're going to have French fries, have a salad with the French fries. Better yet, have a big salad and a few French fries. But, work around what you love and you're going to have, and then try to phase out those things that are not that important to you, but you kind of just do because of habit, perhaps. And then sneak those alkaline substances in, start to make them a part of your life, and you'll see that very quickly you'll miss them. If you don't have them, you'll crave them, you'll want them, because they are, if they're prepared properly, and take care in preparing them. Get good leaves. Don't just, iceberg lettuce and stuff. No. Don't just go to a diner and say, okay, I'm going to have a salad. Those salads are not going to satisfy you or impress you or make you feel like you're enjoying, you're really tapping into how good a salad can be. Get high quality greens, make a beautiful salad, make your own homemade dressing, preferably without oil if you can. If you're going to use oil, make sure it's a high quality, cold pressed, extra virgin olive oil, stone pressed oil, not just typical run of the mill oils. Most salad dressings have oils you would not want to consume in them. And I like to remind people that oils are from machines. They don't do well in the human body. People think oils are okay, that olive oil is good. Olive oil is not good. The way it was consumed, people say, oh, well, the Mediterranean diet, and look at the Mediterranean people. Well, okay, looking at them today, you wouldn't think it was such a good idea. But I understand that looking at the Mediterranean people maybe a few hundred years ago, they were in great shape, but it wasn't because they were consuming olive oil. It was because they were living in harmony with the land. Everything they were doing was in alignment. And the idea that it's really a marketing tactic. When people find when something is identified as being part of a lifestyle, a group that thrived, then it's really easy to advertise and market that thing. It doesn't mean that thing was the reason they thrived. It just means that this is a great opportunity to take people who are programmed to buy what they're told to buy, and that's how we get into that fix. So, were they consuming quantities of olive oil? No. They were consuming a little bit of olive oil as part of a much bigger paradigm that worked in harmony with life. Let's take them apart separately because they kind of go. Okay, so if it's herbal teas are wonderful if they're organic, if they're packaged with organic substances, with organic in an organic way, in a harmonious way. Otherwise, they can wind up, even the best herbal teas can have a lot of chemicals in them. So it's the brand, a lot of things do factor in, like, are the little tea bags, are they bleached? Are there chemicals in them? I mean, there's so much that we don't always know. So your safest bet, of course, is to get a good organic brand of herbal tea, or grab your own tea from the garden if you're so lucky. There's nothing more delicious than fresh mint in hot water. It's like the best tea ever, yes. But I love to get different kinds of teas and mix them up, and I'll often have like a tea stew, because I'll put like 7 or 8, no, not 7 or 8, maybe like 2 or 3 tea bags, sometimes 4 or 5, depends on the day. But when I'm really into tea, usually in the dead of winter, throw a bunch of tea bags in. But herbal tea is great, but black teas and non-herbal teas, even green tea, which again, this is another one of those marketing things, they're caffeinated. So whenever a tea is caffeinated, it's going to be acidic. The degree to which it's caffeinated will be the degree to which it's acidic. So putting, and also acidic teas like coffee, are deeply dehydrating. And the last thing we need is something that's going to make the dehydration a bigger problem. It's already a problem enough. So, so coffee and non-herbal teas are acidic, and they will drain water from the body, and they're not ideal. However, having said that, if somebody changes the matter of their diet, the actual substance that they're eating, the hard food as opposed to the liquidated substance, it's so much more important. The liquid, whether it's coffee or some wine, leave it if you want to. Obviously, don't get drunk every night and don't drink liters of coffee. But if you want to get up and have your morning coffee, and that will enable you to get a little bit further, to create progress. Progress, not perfection, is what one of my mentors used to always say. And I completely agree with that. The little steps will get you there eventually. So leave the coffee in the diet if you want to. Leave the glass of red wine in the diet. Deal with the matter. Deal with the substance of what you're eating first. And if it really helps you to have that coffee or that wine, I'm not going to be the first person. I'm not going to suggest you have to take it away, because a lot of people can get very, very far keeping that in the diet.